We're live? Yes, we're live. We're alive and we're live. Good afternoon, good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Sunday Scoops. And today we're coming in from last week where we did Jamaican R&B. And today we're going to take you from in the 60s up into the 70s and beyond. So we have a whole heap of music, not a whole heap of music, you know. We have a whole heap of music
not tune
to play, and we're going to be, looking at some of the stars of Jamaican R&B in the 70s, 80s, and we're going to also just do a quick re-up from last week. Right, Richie?
I call it recap.
That's it. Not a re-up? Re-up is when you want a second round of liquor. Okay, all right.
Yeah, but again, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome to Sunday Scoops. My name is Mr. B. Over here, so named Big G. Big G. Sir G. We did a nice little introduction last time out. We looked at where the music was coming from. R&B, as we said, is a category of music that, to a large extent, Jamaicans kind of don't recognize the role it played in laying the foundation for where we are at this time as far as our music is concerned. And, we want to take a quick look back from the origin. In the early days, we were listening to music being piped from New Orleans and Florida and so on shortwave radio in the late 1940s, 1950s, and to a large extent but by the 60s, we started to have radio. We had RJR and then JVC came on stream.
But as a kid, though, Richie, 10, 9, 10, 11 years old, I used to tune into WGBS coming out of Miami. I could pick that up on the AM band. So, that was part of our heritage, exposure to foreign music, as it were. And one of the things that I don't think that we expressed enough was the fact that Duke Reed, a Coxsone God, and those guys who were the forerunners, they weren't listening to Jamaican music. They were listening to American music. And these two guys were jazz aficionados. That's all them guys consume. So, to a certain extent, the musicians in Jamaica at the time, that's what they played, big band music and jazz. And using that foundation, that classical music foundation, that laid the foundation for the development of Jamaican music. So if you look at it from it in that perspective, and then now, when you put in the influences like a Willis Jackson or a Roscoe Garden, some of the blues singers in the days, and I'm going to play two of those songs for you. The Roscoe Garden, No Dogging Around, and the Willis Jackson. Later for the Gator, then you'll understand where, and then we're going to play like a Laurel Aitken, just to kind of show a good juxtaposition as to the foundation of what these guys were interpreting the music as. So let's start out with a Willis Jackson, Later for the Gator.
And I'm going to tell you a little story about that tune in particular. That tune I've always history time.
All right, and that was Laurel Aitken asking for more whiskey. Before that, you heard Later for the Gator, and then No Dogging Around, Roscoe Garden. So now that I played the Laurel Aitken, you get to understand. And, interestingly, Richie, if we ever played these songs without referencing Jamaica, you would think you're in New Orleans.
Well, I want to give a story. The
Willis Jackson.
Willis Jackson tune. Willis Jackson, as you pointed out,
saxophonist.
Yeah, but as you pointed out at the beginning, at the start of the program, that Coxsone and Duke Reed in particular, well, people like Tom the Great Sebastian,
all
of these sound system men, they were big on blues, R&B and jazz music. And so at the time, Jamaica had not really started with the recording of music per se, but all of these guys were sound system operators. And so it was a common thing for all of these big sound to clash. Sir Nick the Champ, you know, um, the Tom the Great Sebastian, Duke Reed versus Coxsone. And one particular night, there was a big dance right in the heart of downtown Kingston. The dancer advertised for weeks, and there was a point during the advertising and the billing for the dance that people started to send message to Coxsone that Duke going to kill you tonight. You know, Duke have some of your secret weapon where you have, and Duke going to flag it. And then plus on top of that, Duke, and then we talk about Duke Reed. Of course, at the time, Coxsone had, because he was on this farm work program always in and out of Florida and out of the States generally. And he would pick up these tunes. He had this particular tune, the same Willis Jackson tune, which was a nondescript tune back in America at the time.
Yeah, but in Jamaica.
But in Jamaica, because of the saxophone and thing, you know, the tune Take a Set. And Coxsone had this tune where he clean off the label, right? And him call it, can't remember what was the title of the tune, but it was a murderer tune. And the night, Coxsone and Prince Buster, who was a henchman at the time, decided to go for the session. And when them enter the session yard, them say all of this lignum vitae bush post up all over the place, and people have on them black suit and all them thing there, like them come a funeral. And them say, from them come through the gate, it's like the man them sound up Duke Reed and say, Coxsone coming now. And the man them say Coxsone hear one or two of them tune them where him have as him secret weapon. But him say not too fussed about that, you know, because the Willis Jackson was a murder tune. And him say, him go at the bar and Duke Reed have gone good. And him say Coxsone look nervous still, you know. Nervous like a bat. And him say by the time the man drop on later, him used to call the tune Gator's Tail. That is what Coxsone called the tune, right? And Duke Reed pick up the record and spin it on him finger and say, ha, ha, what you call it? Gator's Tail. Well, it's later for Gator, I have for you. And him show on the Willis Jackson tune and Coxsone drop down. Right? Because the people them rush the bar with them lignum vitae and some fun and a fun cuts.
Revival time.
And what them say, the newspaper, the next man, the Gleaner, print that newspaper story, you know. Coxsone floored by Duke Reed. And the subheading was the night that Coxsone, the Duke Reed killed Coxsone. So the man them take the thing serious. And it kind of underlined, you know, this was the music we were listening to. And it was no, you know, mystery. Where within a couple of years, this music began to take root back in Kingston.
A couple of the songs, 1959, 1960. Coming up, just a quick recap of last week before we get into this week's shenanigans. Theophilus Blackford, Easy Snapping. Yeah, so the purpose of playing the songs I played just now was just kind of illustrating how the music changed over the period of time, where we now start personalizing the song. And the difference is Easy Snapping was done in 1959. I'll Be There When He Comes, 1961, thereabouts. And then You Left Me Standing in 1964. So you're looking at over a 5-year period. And we were still playing. Even when ska was going on, we were still playing boogie woogie.
Well, remember to, you know, because ska basically evolved out of the R&B boogie woogie era. In fact, the musicians who were creating this music, and a lot of these musicians don't even get the kind of mention that they really deserve. I think we pay a lot of a lot of
People
credence to
like a
people like,
drum big or
well, we call it the Scatterlights. You know, they as a group, everybody clearly, you know, can make reference to the Scatterlights. But long before the Scatterlights were out there were other musicians and
like Cool
Clue
J
Jays and
and
the
the
Blues
Blues
Blasters.
Blasters.
You had, you know, other combinations of musicians that were serving outlets like, for example, the the uptown midtown dancehall or club scene. Um, um, Beaumont Beach
Right.
had a nice little setup down there, which was and that was in that um, Kingston 2 area, right in front of Ocean View, that sort of
Ocean View
area,
Avenue.
right? And those were middle class civil, you know, Tapanari civil servant live in those areas.
It's a
And
Tapanakis.
yeah, you know, they use a Jamaican term, Tapanari civil
That is
servant.
another word for aristocrats,
Yeah,
ladies and gentlemen.
right. And can depend by you for translate. But these were, you know, and so these people would their nightlife was at places like Club Havana, right at the foot of the Rockford there, almost just round the corner from what would where the cement company would eventually be located,
Beach
and the
Hotel.
flour mills, right? But these were the places, middle thing, Glass Bucket. There was another club in Crossroads.
Chocomo.
Thing. Well, the Chocomo Lawn, these were the dance hall for the lower class people.
You mean the blue collar workers?
The blue collar, the working class man. And
Tradesman.
those places were where the sound system would congregate.
You know, Richards, talk about sound system. We really need to just start doing some sound system thing. Because I don't think that people really understand the foundation that the sound system played in the development of Jamaican music.
And you are absolutely correct about that. But for the records, though, this is where we're coming from. At the time, too, again, it's very important that we set that stage because we're looking at that late 1950s, early 1960s. The country had not even become independent yet. You know, this was prior to 1962.
Yeah, we were still a colony.
Right, and a lot of people from the rural areas were moving into Kingston because they were figuring this was an opportunity for them to find jobs. You know, agriculture. But the other side of it is that government was running off enough of these capture land people after the crown land. So they came to Kingston, and as I think I mentioned in the last program, the development of the country had started to take place. Bauxite, tourism, in the bauxite lands, they were evicting people, you know, squatters from a lot of these rural lands to mine them out for bauxite. And hundreds of thousands of these Jamaicans were basically displaced, dislocated, and they headed into Kingston. And the trouble is, coming to Kingston, the sidewalk paved with gold theory that a lot of them were sold never materialized. And they came into Kingston needing to find stuff to do, especially the youngsters in those groups, and like a 12, 13, 14-year-olds. They saw themselves as, you know, wanting to do better than their own parents. And the decision was music was the direction that they wanted to go. At the time, too, we mentioned the talent shows, and of course, what's his name? The 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 Veer John's
Right.
Veer John's opportunity hour, and Veer John's basically would select or advertise for talent that would come from, because all these communities are them like a talent show, and the leading participants in those talent shows would become the target for the Veer Johns thing. And what Veer Johns was doing, he had a program that he was broadcasting on JBC. By now JBC had just started up, and he would take like the top three in his competition would come on his radio program, and You know, very simple, but still nonetheless sophisticated arrangement where he would provide a band, the artist would come, and them singing. Basically, I sing for them supper. You know,
Right.
the winner of these contests gets something like £5. Now, £5 could almost buy it could have buy a bike. If it can't buy a car, it can buy a bike, or so it's a good money. And when the most of these singers, them try not to have no big crowd because if you come with a quartet or a quintet, you have to share the money.
Yeah.
And them doing that. So it was more the individuals. Granted, this was the period when the groups were the big thing. So people try to, imitate the groups. Or you were a Sam Cooke, which wasn't singing with anybody, or you were a Curtis Mayfield, Jackie Wilson, that sort of thing. And so you win £5. Derek Harriott had a story. He said he came second or third one time, and he got £2 for the prize. And him said, what happened now the thing working is that these theaters, Ambassador, Rialto, Palace, this is where these shows would normally be held. The final is usually at a big cinema like Carib or Ward Theater. And him said what happened is the community have, because every participant bring him cheering section. And if you don't have a cheering section, you usually have someone hang out on the outside of the contest hall and them offer themselves as cheering, as cheering group.
Mm-hmm.
The ironic thing is sometimes them offer themselves to half of the people that moved up on the show. So when John Brown performed, hey, and when Harry Jones performed, the same man them cheer for Harry Jones. And so the idea was you pay them, so you make them exclusive. But them still a draw hand by it. And then to make matters worse, the people who would have lost like the previous week, they would come back and boo the people who think. So this is where the whole thing of Kingstonians getting this reputation of being hard to please. And them said to make matters worse, because these young people were leaving the country, coming to town. Once the news spread that these singing contests was taking place, you have youths now a journey from country, come to town because they want to be part of this thing. Because, of course, everybody say this is the opportunity to make something of yourself based off of your own talent. So
and this is one guy who made something of himself. 1962 came out with a song called I Cried a Tear, talking about the legendary John Holt. And we're back. So yeah, Richie, now what is happening now is that Jamaican music starts to get its own identity. So one of the first sounds to come out apart from the R&B sound was ska, and then rocksteady, and then reggae music, and it went into other different interpretations of the music. But at the foundation is R&B. And you also have Jamaican soul music to start.
Something that that we shouldn't miss in terms of what sort of helped pave that way. We were listening to a lot of this music, and this music was kind of driving our singers to go in this direction. But there was another factor. Again, the proliferation of sound systems, right? Because of all of these sound systems that were out there, trying to make their way, if you will. A lot of them didn't have the access that some of the bigger sounds had to the music. And so with the opening up of the recording in Kingston, because that's where it was centered at the time.
First with Stanley Motown.
Yeah, through Stanley Motown. A lot of these sound systems realized that, hey, if we could capture some of this talent coming from the singing shows, because 90% of the the participants were singers.
And one of the things too that we have to look at is the mastery of the music that was being played in these theaters.
Right. So again, they were already listening to these R&B singers, these soul or blues,
The Sam Cooks, the Benny Kings,
right?
Nat King Cole,
And we're basically trying to sing like them. And so sound systems realize that, hold on, if we can get these guys to do specials for us, we can use those specials against the other songs. But more importantly, the Stanley Motor wasn't just recording, it was selling equipment, radio, record player, and so on. And so the availability of a record player, where you call a Warner's or a Philips or a garage sound system, which is just like a turntable with a changer, a record changer.
And they have two speakers.
And two speakers. Or all in one.
All in one, and then you just detach the speakers and put them off to the side.
And that detached part come later on. In the early days, so it was one console. On one side you have the speaker, and then on the other side you have the changer. And you can stack up like a 10 album with a little arm. And as one album done,
the other one
it drops the next one.
But it was an automatic changer before that even come into play.
It was hand done. And so once people start to buy these things, it became obvious that if them like this tune that they was hearing at the dance, them start to go to the record outlets, which were few and far between, and start asking for these songs. And so that created a domestic demand, and that domestic demand also somersaulted out of Jamaica and started to go to places like England, Canada, and to a lesser extent the United States.
And before the federal records and all that, music was recorded either in America,
right,
to go to Miami,
or in England.
It's
either you go to England or you go to the United States.
Comes to Miami.
But the finishing was done in Florida. But again, once people start to buy commercial record playing equipment or home use thing, then the industry for recorded material start to develop. And so out of it, the talent, it was now responding to the demand of the listener. Radio station quietly start to squeeze through one or two of these local artists on their airwaves. But people who knew the artist output and know that this artist have more than this one record that them keep riding on, were now going out to think. And so that R&B music, soul music, that at some point some might we call soul music, some might we even mistake it as what you call, well, before we even call, some was rock and roll, because some might was that
Because
fast.
if you listen to that Laurel Aitken that I played, there's another one that I have here called Boogie Rock.
Right.
And it almost sounds, I'm going to give the listeners here Boogie Rock and see how close it is to the rock and roll. Yeah, that was the song called Kissin' Gal by the Dragonaires, Byron Lee and the Buddy Davidson. Before that, you heard Boogie Rock, Laurel Aitken and the Boogie Cats.
There was some other people that this music, this era of the music gave rise to. There was Bonnie and Scully. Bonnie used to sell peanut during, in the later years. He was selling, Bonnie the Peanut Man, they used to call him, sell peanut at stadium and at Sabina Park during cricket match. But in the late 50s, early 60s, Bonnie teamed up with Scully and did quite a number of pieces like these. And it's amazing that with the passage of time, he just seemed that that music or the output from people like him just basically fall by the wayside. Again, Jamaicans were listening to this kind of music, songs like Red River Rock, which Bonnie and Scully gave their own interpretation of. what do you call it? There are a couple of really popular songs that they did, and I think ultimately Scully went lost his sight and so on. But a lot of these guys, they were doing these songs for the sound system guy, and there was at the end of the day there was really nothing in it for them, and so that output basically fall by the wayside. But it provided influence. It acted as an influence for some of the players who would come down the line. People like a Derek Harriott who became a big crooner. It opened the door to the some of the later bands that would come, late 60s into the 1970s, and literally set a tone for a different set of music. But certainly the 1960s, it was this variation of R&B that was driving the sound system. This kind of music to give birth to people like, certainly increase their value. People like King Stitt, who would have been deemed as a toaster at the time. People like Sir Lord Comic, because all of these guys were basically operating as toasters. When the music, you get a bridge part of the music where the musician play them solo, they would come in and, make some little sound. It would have been later days, yeah?
Like,
Yeah, there you go.
or something like that. Yeah,
You know,
to that effect.
but it would be up to people like King Stitt to a lesser extent, and then Uriah, who would have followed through after that and turn that into another genre of music, which is a whole different discussion again.
All right, so here's a Bonnie and Scully song called "Don't Do It." Play these songs, Richie, the more I realize how rich the Jamaican music history is and how unappreciated or how unappreciative we are of the foundation and the effort that was, well, even though at the time when it was being done, they didn't even know what they were doing either. You know? It's just that hindsight is 2020 and we can romanticize the music. But apart from the romanticism, this is damn good work.
What is intriguing is people like Bonnie and Scully again came through the same Virgin's thing. I remember having conversations with him and him talk about the the era. Yeah, I think both of them know passed away, but this was you know them sing a tune like this and then probably get a £10. Them sell the tune to a sound system, Coxsone more than likely, because I think this song featured on a Coxsone album, a 1968 or 67 album with Coxsone, um, Coxsone and the Blues or something. I don't remember, but they would have gotten just a couple pounds for this song, and here is a tune that, for all intent and purpose, a classic. But again, you're coming out of an environment where you don't really have any knowledge of the business side of the music industry. And so, your lack of knowledge punishes you.
And then at the time too, again, you just basically just want to hear yourself on radio. That's desire. Because at the time, Richie, again, it's just theory and conjecture. That's all we can think about. The fact that there was not the presence of honesty to do good by an artist is bad. But at the same time, the artist not doing anything himself either because of ignorance.
Let's be reasonable. Yeah, and I'm glad you make that point about ignorance. Because here's the thing. Most of these youths you're talking about 1950s. Remember, it is after Jamaica got independent that the British government had passed a grant for some, I don't remember how much money, millions of pounds, to build schools across the island. They were supposed to build something like, 60 schools, and they must have built about 10. Right?
And before the schools were built, we have to put in there that at that time, the literacy rate in Jamaica, illiteracy rate was 80% or probably higher.
Hi there. If you enjoyed that clip, go on over to our website at yardmedia.com where you can watch the entire broadcast at your leisure. And while you're there, why don't you check out our other reggae music features? And before you leave, pick up some of our Jamaican reggae merchandise and hey, don't forget to tell your friends.